So late last night, early this morning, the RMB finally broke through that psychological barrier, the overhead resistance level of 7 against the US dollar. It is currently at, let me pull up my Forex website, 7.0501 against the dollar. So China had been attempting to defend this for a while. President Trump has already, and it is causing the RMB doing this against the dollar, is causing volatility, chaos, and turmoil throughout many markets. So the yield curve has actually gone most extreme yield curve inversion since just before the 2008 financial crisis. The 10-year note sank to 1.74% today. A lot of it has to do with what happened with the RMB. The stock market, the S&P 500 is down 2.62%. The Dow was down at 1.2.7%. It was down, and gold is up to $1,477. Oil is also down. So the Bitcoin price also is up almost 9% today alone. I believe the Bitcoin price has been rallying quite a bit lately. The Bitcoin price is almost at 1,200 at 11,878. So there is a lot of market moves, and a lot of it has to do probably with Wall Street worrying about this escalating trade war. So Donald Trump put out 2 tweets already today in the last couple hours. I'll quote him. China is intent on continuing to receive the hundreds of billions of dollars they have been taking from the U.S. with unfair trade practices and currency manipulation. So one-sided, it should have been stopped many years ago. They used currency manipulation to steal our businesses and factories, hurt our jobs, depress our workers' wages, and harm our farmers' prices. Not anymore. So based on the historic currency manipulation by China, it is now even more obvious to everyone that Americans are not paying for the tariffs. They are being paid for compliments of China, and the U.S. is taking in tens of billions of dollars. China has always... Okay, China dropped the price of their currency. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, there's 4 tweets. I missed one. China, okay, this was 5 hours ago. So he did 4 tweets in the last 2 hours, and then one more tweet. China dropped the price of their currency to an almost historic low. It's called, quote, currency manipulation. Are you listening, Federal Reserve? This is a major violation which will greatly weaken China over time. Yeah, but the U.S. also, this is so hypocritical because the U.S. wants a weaker dollar. They just want a controlled devaluation. This is a pot calling the kettle black. These governments, all of them, are so freaking stupid. So, what does this mean? I spoke last night once the RMB had broken 7, the overhead resistance level. And by the way, guys, this is a major psychological barrier. There are a lot of people in mainland China who have been expecting that this would happen and have wanted to get their currency, their savings out of China. So the price of gold in RMB is up almost 3% today. And if you look at a chart, in the last couple months, the gold price in RMB has gapped up. It gapped up about a month ago. So it gapped up. It looks like it gapped up again today. And I also spoke to my source in China, and he contacted bullion dealers, and he said that premiums now at bullion dealers in China are 7% above the spot price. So premiums are quite high. So a lot of people in mainland China are buying gold. They are willing to pay a 7% premium. They are worried about currency devaluation. They do not necessarily, just like Americans, they don't necessarily, a lot of them don't necessarily trust their government. And a lot of them are buying Bitcoin and gold. It's bad when any country devalues their currency. It hurts the savers. It hurts people's wages. Their purchasing power is stolen when a government devalues currency. And the governments are lying about the real inflation rate. And this is why financial repression, stagflate, and tax and lie is so good. Because most people don't understand what's going on. They just blame capitalism. And then the governments get away with it. The governments get more power. They can implement more policy. There was a saying that Obama's chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, used to say, don't let a good crisis go to waste. This is how governments think. Hey, thanks, Lester. I'm glad you liked the content. I'm working on a slide deck for a China presentation because there's just so much currency creation in China and their credit bubble. I have to show you guys with charts and graphs with household debt and their money supply going crazy. Their M0, which is their base currency unit, just cash and coins, it's gone up over sevenfold in not a long amount of time. Well, but every country wants to devalue. See, that's the thing. All these countries all believe in a version of mercantilism and a version of Keynesian economics. They all want to devalue because they all have debt problems now. The US has a big debt problem with unfunded liabilities, government debt. European Union has a debt problem. Japan has a debt problem. Emerging markets have a debt problem. China has a big debt problem. All the major players, all the major economies, are way over indebted. So this is why I keep saying that mistakes of the 1920s and 30s is not exact, but a lot of the same mistakes are being repeated. A lot of very painful lessons. A lot of people, there was wars, a lot of people died, a lot of people starved. A lot of people, if you go back and read The Forgotten Man by Amity Shlaes, a lot of people killed themselves during the Great Depression. They couldn't get a job. They couldn't pay their bills. They killed themselves out of shame. So, I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I think we're already heading back there. The suicide, if you study the articles, the suicide rates among males, Western males, especially in the United States, has gone crazy. Even the suicide rates among doctors is very, very high. It spiked a lot. And that's because these doctors are burdened with ridiculous loans. My dad's a former doctor. I know I have a couple doctors who listen routinely to this podcast. It's ridiculous how much student loan debt doctors get burdened with. So, we'll see what happens. We'll see if the U.S. decides to retaliate. Oh, I was going to tell one more story. So, apparently with Trump announcing those tariffs, remember the additional 10% tariffs on $300 billion, none of the people in his administration wanted him to increase the tariffs. So he overruled everyone else. That's the story that's going around. That Steve Mnuchin, his chief of staff, the people at the Federal Reserve, the other people in the Treasury Department, other of his close advisors told him not to put on those other tariffs, that it could do a lot of damage and the Chinese retaliation could be even stronger. And Trump said, I've had enough. We're not progressing in the negotiations and I'm going to do it. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if that backfires. We'll see what the blowback is. But it looks like the people in China do not want to hold the RMB either. And I don't blame them. I don't trust any fiat currency. I criticize all governments. It's not China bashing. I criticize every single government. Okay? Facts are facts. Figures are figures. Math is math. If you didn't have any debt in your economy 10 years ago, and all of a sudden you have over 40 trillion in credit in only 10 years, the largest credit bubble in history, you deserve to be criticized. The U.S. government deserves to be criticized routinely. The Japanese government deserves to be criticized for a lot of their bad infrastructure plans. I think what they did, they concreted rivers for ditch digging. It was straight up Keynesian ditch digging make works projects. Okay, all these governments are liars. All of them waste money. Waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse. It's pervasive. I get sent stories all the time from listeners all over the globe. I've been getting sent stories lately from one of my listeners in Australia, and it's not just Chinese construction companies. It's a lot of construction companies in Australia. There's buildings falling apart. Okay, there's tons of buildings in Australia during their real estate and construction bubble now, and people can't pay their bills in Australia, and real estate prices are too high, and a lot of people are underwater in their mortgages, and a lot of these Australian banks did the same mortgage-backed security toxic garbage. I don't think it was on the scale, but they did some of it. It's a new normal, man. I mean, in a developed country like Australia, there should not be buildings falling apart due to bad construction. Even in the United States, if there's bad construction, people go to prison. They either get sued for fraud in the civil court system and the tort system for wrongful death or other things. I have experience like this. I was in law school briefly. They get sued. There's a reason for that. And in other countries, they just don't have a lot of this yet. There's not as much rule of law. Now, there is too many lawsuits in the U.S., but some lawsuits are necessary. Boeing should get their pantsuit off. BP, for the Macondo oil well blowout, they should have basically went bankrupt. I think the federal government, the U.S. federal government, stepped in and capped their losses. I spoke to some of the victims there, some of the shrimp boat captains and the fishermen in the Gulf of Mexico. I spoke to them after the crisis, and they didn't get really any of their money. So BP was running this public relations campaign that we're giving out billions of dollars. A lot of people didn't get their money. And the Boeing victims for this fiasco there, where they outsourced the software to basically minimum wage coders or below minimum wage coders, when they could have hired people in the United States at a reasonable salary. Look, I criticize everyone at this point. Very few people are doing a good job, unfortunately. There is very little honesty and integrity left in the system. So I expect people in China, they're gonna go to crypto. They're gonna go to the most liquid crypto. They're not gonna go to all the cryptos. They can't buy cryptocurrency on an exchange. I believe it's difficult. So they're doing peer to peer. They're meeting up. From what I listened to a really good interview from China Uncensored, and they interviewed a Bitcoin expert who lives in China and visits there frequently, and he was talking about how people in China get around the laws to use Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency. And people don't buy it on an exchange. They meet in person. They meet in person and they agree maybe on a price, and then the money is sent through Alipay or WeChat Pay, and then the wallet, the keys are given in the agreement, and then the crypto is exchanged for the RMB without using a cryptocurrency exchange. But I don't think, though, that people are buying and holding Bitcoin in China. I think it's just an intermediary to get savings out of mainland China with the capital controls. Yeah. Well, I didn't say they bought and hold crypto. They're not. A lot of people in China, I don't think, are holding. I think they're using it as an intermediary to get money out. So from what I've heard, a lot of people, there's a big gold rush. There's a run on gold in China. Maybe I should have put that in the title. But a lot of this, the RMB devaluation, the RMB exchange rate to the dollar is what's setting off the reverberations with the U.S. stock market, the yield curve, the gold price in RMB and dollars, and then the Bitcoin price. Okay, well, that's it for this short little update. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Well, I don't know if they take $3.50. I don't know exactly how much they take or not. Doesn't really matter. I appreciate the effort. Every little bit adds up. Okay, guys, well, that's it for right now. I'm going to work probably on my China video later tonight. It'll probably take at least a couple more days. I have like 20 slides. There's a lot of charts and graphs. The amount of credit explosion, the amount of debt in households in China, a lot, like I've been saying for a long time, a lot has changed in the last 10 years. Most people in the gold community don't believe me because it doesn't fit their agenda. You know, they'll just ignore the charts and graphs anyway. But the people who have open minds, they will respect the work that I've done. Okay, that's it for now.